Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. When he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. The text moves quickly. There is no pause between exile and construction. Cain, who went out from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, now becomes a builder. The man marked by judgment becomes the founder of a city. This is our first recorded city in Scripture. The narrative is remarkably restrained. There is no explicit moral evaluation in the verse itself. We are not told that building a city is evil. We are not told that it is righteous. We are simply told that Cain built and that he named. Naming in Genesis carries theological weight. Adam named the animals as an act of delegated authority. God renamed Abram as a sign of covenantal purpose. To name is to define, to establish identity, to shape memory. Cain names the city after his son, Enoch. The pattern is subtle but significant. Earlier in Genesis, the human vocation was to fill the earth. Movement outward was not a curse, but a commission. Yet Cain, the wanderer, establishes permanence. The fugitive becomes the founder of settled civilization. The restless man creates walls. There is irony here. The city arises from the line of the one who departed from the presence of the Lord. As the genealogy unfolds, the text traces successive generations. Enoch fathered Irad. Irad fathered Mehujael. Mehujael fathered Methushael, and Methushael fathered Lamech. The names pass quietly, without commentary. Yet the structure itself communicates continuity. Sin has not halted multiplication. Judgment has not erased productivity. The line of Cain flourishes. When we arrive at Lamech, the narrative slows. This is the first figure in the genealogy who speaks, and what he speaks matters. Lamech took 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. Here, for the first time in Scripture, monogamy gives way to polygamy. The pattern established in Genesis 2, one man, one woman, united in covenant, is now altered. Again, there is no explicit condemnation in the verse itself. Within the narrative flow of Genesis, deviation from the creational pattern is never neutral. Lamech's household becomes the seedbed of cultural expansion. Ada bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. In 3 brief descriptions, the text identifies the emergence of nomadic pastoralism, music, and metallurgy. Civilization advances. Agriculture had already appeared with Cain and Abel. Now specialization develops. Animal husbandry becomes structured livelihood. Music emerges as organized art. Metalworking appears as technological mastery. It is crucial to observe that the text does not condemn these developments. Music is not presented as corrupt. Metal is not portrayed as inherently evil. Tents and livestock are not morally suspect. These are cultural goods. They reflect the human capacity to cultivate creation. The cultural mandate echoes faintly even within the line of Cain. Yet something else is happening beneath the surface. The genealogy builds toward a speech. Lamech speaks to his wives. Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. This is the first poem recorded in Scripture, and it is not a hymn, it is a boast. Violence, which entered through Cain's murder of Abel, has not diminished, it has intensified.
Cain killed his brother in secret and feared retribution. Lamech proclaims his violence publicly and magnifies retaliation. Cain received a protective mark from God, a restraint on escalating vengeance. Lamech transforms that mercy into a principle of personal exaltation. If Cain's protection was sevenfold, Lamech claims 77-fold vengeance. The number signals exaggeration. It is not arithmetic, it is arrogance. Civilization has progressed, art has emerged, technology has developed, but the human heart remains unchanged. The genealogy thus presents a layered picture. On the surface, we see innovation, organization, and growth. Beneath the surface, we see pride, distortion of marriage, and escalating violence. The city stands, music sounds, metal is forged, and yet revenge sings louder. Genesis is not anti-culture, but it is clear-eyed about culture's ambiguity. Human creativity persists after the fall. The image of God has not been erased, but creativity detached from humble dependence upon God does not heal the human condition. The line of Cain demonstrates that productivity does not equal righteousness. It is possible to build cities while moving further from the presence of the Lord. It is possible to create beauty while cultivating vengeance. It is possible to advance technologically while regressing morally. The genealogy does not preach this in abstract terms, it narrates it. The structure of the text itself reinforces the contrast that is about to emerge. We have a line defined by building, forging, composing, multiplying, and boasting. And then, without fanfare, the narrative will shift. But before it does, we must linger here. The development of culture in Genesis 4 reminds us that God's common grace sustains humanity even outside covenantal faithfulness. The sun rises on Cain's descendants. They think, design, organize, and innovate. The capacity for art and structure is not limited to the righteous. This observation protects us from simplistic readings. The Bible does not equate cultural sophistication with godliness, nor does it equate technological advancement with divine favor. The line of Cain teaches us that culture can thrive even where worship is absent. And yet, the text leaves us unsettled. For all its progress, the genealogy ends not with harmony, but with threat. Lamech's song reverberates as the last word of Cain's line in this section. Violence has become lyrical, pride has become poetic, and vengeance has become generational. The question quietly forms, is this the trajectory of humanity? Is civilization merely the refinement of rebellion? The text does not answer immediately. Instead, it turns. The final verses of the passage will introduce another birth, another name, another beginning. And with that turn, the narrative will reorient from cultural achievement to something deeper, something that will define the future of redemptive history. Before we move there, we must feel the weight of what has been shown. Humanity can accomplish much while remaining estranged from God. The city of Enoch stands as testimony, but it does not yet answer the deeper need of the human soul.
The narrative now pivots with deliberate simplicity. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and called his name Seth, for she said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. The genealogy of Cain ends in defiant poetry. The line of Adam continues in quiet acknowledgement of loss and divine provision. The contrast is immediate, though understated. Eve names her son Seth, which sounds like the Hebrew word for appointed or granted. The naming here is explicitly theological.
She interprets the birth not merely as biological continuation, but as divine appointment. Cain named a city after his son. Eve names her son in reference to God. The difference is subtle but decisive. One naming secures legacy, the other confesses dependence. Abel is mentioned again, and with him the memory of righteous suffering. The text does not allow us to forget that worship had already appeared in the previous generation. Abel brought an offering by faith. Cain rejected correction and shed blood. Now, through Seth, a new line emerges, not replacing Abel's faith, but extending it. The narrative then adds a brief but profound statement. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. The structure of the passage brings us here intentionally. After city building, artistic invention, technological progress, and poetic violence, we arrive at invocation. People began to call upon the name of the Lord. The phrase is rich with theological significance. To call upon the name of the Lord is not merely to utter a title. In the Old Testament, the name represents revealed character. To invoke the name is to approach God as He has made Himself known. This is the language of worship, petition, and covenantal acknowledgement. The text does not say that this is the first moment of faith in human history. Abel's offering already testified to trust. But here, the emphasis shifts from individual act to communal pattern. There is now a people defined not merely by descent, but by invocation. The line of Cain is described through achievements. The line of Seth is marked by worship. This does not mean that Seth's descendants are immediately righteous in every respect. Genesis will later make clear that corruption spreads widely. But at this stage in the narrative, the theological distinction is clear. One line magnifies human capability, the other acknowledges divine sovereignty. The timing of this development is significant. It arises not in the context of cultural triumph, but in the aftermath of violence and loss. Worship emerges not from ease, but from recognition of need. People began to call upon the name of the Lord. The verb suggests ongoing action. It becomes characteristic. It marks identity. In contrast to Lamech's boastful song, this calling is humble dependence. In contrast to the city named after Enoch, this gathering is defined by the Lord's name. The narrative does not romanticize primitivism nor condemn structure. Rather, it reorients the center. Culture is not ultimate. Technology is not ultimate. Even family legacy is not ultimate. Invocation is ultimate. This is the theological axis of the passage. Genesis chapter 4, verses 17 through 26 is not merely preserving ancient names, it is tracing two trajectories of the human heart. One seeks permanence through construction and retaliation. The other seeks stability through calling upon the Lord. The text invites reflection. What defines a people? Is it architecture, innovation, artistic achievement, military strength, or the name they invoke? The early chapters of Genesis consistently return to this question. Humanity was created for fellowship with God. Sin disrupted that fellowship. The mark of restoration is not primarily cultural correction, but relational reorientation. Calling upon the name of the Lord signals that reorientation. It acknowledges that life cannot be secured by walls, protection cannot be guaranteed by vengeance, meaning cannot be generated by art alone. The genealogy of Cain demonstrates that civilization can develop independently of worship. The birth of Seth reveals that true hope lies elsewhere. The text closes this section without spectacle. There is no dramatic confrontation between the two lines. There is no immediate resolution. Instead, there is continuity. A son is born, a name is given, a pattern begins, and the story moves forward through generations. The contrast will deepen in the chapters ahead, but here, at the close of Genesis chapter 4, we are given a theological lens. History unfolds through lines, through families, through remembered names. And within those lines, the decisive difference is not productivity, but posture toward God. Thus, the passage leaves us with a quiet but penetrating distinction. One lineage builds cities, another calls upon the Lord, and Scripture will follow the latter.
As we reflect upon this passage as a whole, its theological coherence becomes increasingly clear. Genesis 4:17 through 26 does not condemn culture, nor does it glorify simplicity. Instead, it situates culture within a deeper moral and spiritual framework. The descendants of Cain are not portrayed as incompetent or stagnant. They are innovators. They organize society. They develop music. They forge tools. They expand the possibilities of human life in a fallen world. Yet their narrative culminates in Lamech's song of vengeance. The descendants of Seth, by contrast, are introduced without technological detail. No inventions are recorded, no cities are named. Instead, we are told that they began to call upon the name of the Lord. The text invites us to consider what endures. Cities rise and fall, instruments decay, metal corrodes. But the invocation of the Lord establishes a relationship that transcends generational instability. This contrast is not merely ancient history, it is a recurring pattern in every age. Human societies continue to build, compose, engineer, and expand. None of these activities are inherently opposed to God's purposes. Indeed, they reflect the residual glory of His image in humanity. But when cultural achievement becomes self-referential, when it exists for self-exaltation rather than grateful stewardship, it begins to echo Lamech rather than Seth. The pastoral application emerges naturally from the text's structure. The question is not whether we participate in culture. The question is whether our participation is framed by invocation. Do we build as those who call upon the Lord, or do we build to secure a name for ourselves? The early city of Enoch foreshadows later biblical cities: Babel, Nineveh, Babylon. Each represents organized human ambition. Each embodies the tension between human capacity and divine authority. Yet alongside these cities runs another thread, the line through which God will unfold His redemptive purpose. That line does not advance through dominance, but through promise. Genesis 4 closes with hope, but it is restrained hope. Seth is born instead of Abel. The memory of loss remains. Redemption in Scripture does not erase history, it moves through it. The calling upon the name of the Lord signals not triumph, but dependence. It acknowledges fragility. It confesses need. It expresses trust. For mature believers, this passage calls for sober self-examination. We inhabit a world of extraordinary cultural sophistication. Our tools surpass those of Tubal-Cain beyond comparison. Our music travels across continents instantly. Our cities reach into the sky. Yet the ancient question persists: does our advancement deepen humility, or does it amplify pride? Genesis does not instruct us to abandon building. It instructs us to remember whose name we bear.
To call upon the name of the Lord is to recognize that identity is received, not constructed. Security is granted, not engineered. Justice belongs to God, not to escalating retaliation. Lamech multiplied vengeance. The Lord later teaches forgiveness beyond measure. The seed of that future teaching lies here, in the exposure of unchecked revenge. The line of Seth prepares the way for further genealogies that will lead to Noah, to Abraham, to Israel, and ultimately to Christ. The continuity of redemptive history flows not through the most impressive city, but through the line marked by faith. Thus, Genesis 4:17 through 26 quietly establishes a theological principle that reverberates throughout Scripture. The future belongs not to those who exalt themselves, but to those who invoke the Lord. As we close this episode, we recognize that the story is not finished. The lineage continues through generations. Names will accumulate, corruption will intensify, judgment and grace will intertwine. But already the dividing line has been drawn. Two trajectories emerge from the same parents. Two ways of inhabiting the world unfold side by side. One seeks permanence through construction and retaliation. The other seeks meaning through worship and dependence. The narrative does not ask us to withdraw from culture. It asks us to situate culture beneath covenant. The lineage continues through the generations. And as we move into the next chapter, we will see how these lines develop, how the calling upon the name of the Lord persists in a world increasingly marked by corruption, and how divine faithfulness sustains His purposes through time. The story advances not through spectacle, but through remembered names and enduring promise. And so we follow the line.